Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited because I haven't uploaded a book video on my YouTube in so long. If you guys follow me on TikTok or Instagram, I do have book accounts over there, so you guys have probably been keeping up with my book journey, everything that I've read this year, but I wanted to do one big video where I talk about every book that I read in 2024. I read 76 books this year, which I was so excited about because this is my biggest reading goal that I set for myself. It was actually very hard, but I'm really glad because I did it. I think in 2025, I'm gonna lower my reading goal and do less books because I felt like I was just like reading a lot of nonsense, as you guys will see as I go through this video. I'm not gonna talk too long about books that I didn't love in this video, but there are so many books that I did love that I'm really excited to talk about, and I feel like it was just such a good reading year for me. Okay, let's just get into it. The first book I read this year was Say You Swear. I think you guys know how I felt about this book. I did have like high hopes for it, but I just didn't end up loving it. I felt like it was too long for me and I just wasn't super invested in the plot of this book, so I did end up giving this one 3 stars. The next book I read was Before We Were Strangers. It's actually in my top 24 books of 2024. I uploaded those on my Instagram, all my favorite books, and on my TikTok if you guys want to go see what my top 24 books were because I ranked them all, but this one was in it. This is by Renee Carlino. It's just such a good romance book in the best way. Like, I just loved everything about it. I actually made my mom read this book this year and I ended up giving this 5 stars. The next 3 books I read were the Sinners Anonymous series. This is a dark romance. It's a mafia dark romance, and I really enjoyed them. These were also in my top 24. I don't know what it was about these books, but I need to find more by this author because I really liked them, and I think that this is kind of what kickstarted me reading a little bit more dark romance this year. The next 2 books I read were The Wicked King and then Queen of Nothing. These are the last 2 books in the Folk of the Air series. This is by Holly Black. The first book is The Cruel Prince, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen. So I read these last 2. I really enjoyed them. It's a young adult fantasy. It's very, like, the best way I could describe it is like folky folklore vibe. It's like fairies and riding like toads. I don't know how to like describe it, but I really liked it a lot. And I thought her writing was just really, like, the way she described everything, I felt very immersed in what she built. And I also love a fantasy series that is only like 3 books. Like, I love a trilogy. Sometimes I don't want to commit to like a 7-book long series. This one was really great. And then the next book I read was Cruel King by Rena Kent. This was the first book I ever read by Rena Kent, and you'll see I read a lot of her this year. She is a dark romance author, and this is like where I really jumped in. This first book, I gave it a 3.5. I think I would keep it at 3.5. Like, all of the Rena Kent books that I read this year were not like none of them made like my top 24 list, but like I enjoyed them. Like, it was just kind of like an easy read. You know, sometimes you're just in a mood to be like, oh, I just read like a one-off like dark romance, kind of random. It's not too intense. It's almost like I kind of use dark romance books, which is crazy. I use them as a palate cleanser. Like, anytime I'm reading something where I like read a long series, I kind of like go back into reading Rena Kent, and because they're like 260, 300 pages, it's just so easy for me to read. And I honestly used a lot of these books to meet my reading goal this year, which I also enjoyed them, but they're just very easy. If you've never read any, she has like 50 books in her universe of books, which is crazy. So I wanted to start at the very beginning. I found a reading order online, and so the first one was Cruel King, and I gave it 3.5. The next book I read is Mad Honey. I am so happy with this book. This was on my list last year and I just never got around to reading it. I'm really glad I did. I actually rated it 4 stars on my Goodreads account, but it's literally my number 3 book of the year. Like, I'm obsessed with it, so I would go back and give it 5. I don't really know why I gave it that. Maybe I was just like trying to be picky with my stars for some reason, but I loved Mad Honey. It's about a woman whose son, he's like dating this girl, and the girl ends up dead, and he is now going to be on trial for her murder. And the mom, it's like the mom's point of view, so she's trying to figure out, like, did he do it? Did he not do it? There's just so many more like meaningful messages around that. Like, I wouldn't even say it's not like it's like a thriller, like kind of, because there's that mystery aspect, but it's so much more than that, and it's so beautiful, and I just loved the way it was written. So I gave this one 4 stars, but I would give it 5 now. The next series I read was the Ravenhood series. So it's Flock, Exodus, and The Finish Line. All 3 of them were honestly insane. Like, if you read these books, you're gonna be like, what? They're dark romance. It's kind of a take on on Robin Hood almost. Like it's about like there's like a group of guys that kind of like steal from the rich, give back to the poor. But I made Nat read this book. I made her read this series. Of course she loved it. It's very spicy and it's like a lot of dark romance, but also you're literally confused the entirety of the series. Like I honestly, I rated them all 5 stars, and even on the last book I did not even understand like what do they do, what is the storyline, like what is going on, but I was obsessed with it. I don't know what that, like I read these books so quickly I couldn't get enough of them, but I also had no idea what was happening. That is the best way I could describe it. But honestly, I feel like if you love dark romance, please read the Ravenhood series, like please, because it was so good. Next, I read House of Flame and Shadow. I gave this 5 stars. You guys know I love Sarah J Maas. This is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series. If you haven't read it, if you haven't read any Sarah J Maas, don't start with Crescent City, but it wasn't as good obviously as other books that I've read by her, like in my ranking of all of her books. Wrapped up everything in a really nice way that I enjoyed, and it was honestly one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, so I was very happy with that. The next book I read was Deviant King by Rena Kent. Again, another dark romance. I liked this series. This is like 3 books in the series. The first one, Deviant King, I gave it 4 stars. I liked it a lot more than her other ones. And then I moved on and I read This Woven Kingdom. This book, this was also, I think it's in my top 10. It's number 9. Number 9 of all of my books that I've read this year. This is a fantasy series that I have been trying to really push on to you guys because I think that you guys would love it. I don't know specifically. I think it's young adult, and I just want to give a little spiel. If you guys are not used to reading like young adult fantasies, or you guys don't tend to read them because you guys love the spice element, like how it is in ACOTAR and like all of that kind of stuff, I promise you, like, please give young adult fantasy a chance, because honestly, you don't need the spice to be invested in the plot and invested in the characters. Read other spicy books on your own time, but I promise you, This Woven Kingdom is so good. I love the female main character in this book. It's literally about like this woman who, she's essentially like a housemaid. She's like a housekeeper in this kingdom where her people have been, I can't remember if it's like killed or like ostracized or whatever, and she's just like in this kingdom pretending that she's not one of them. She like covers her face and does all this stuff. I don't want to give anything away, but it gets so wild. There's like a prince, there's a king, there's a little bit of triangle. There's so much stuff in this book that I think you guys would love. So that was This Woven Kingdom, and I gave the first book a 4, and then I read These Infinite Threads, which is the second book. I gave that one a 4 as well. Twists and turns of this series, you really can't guess where it's going. Then I read 2 books by Rena Kent. I read Steel Princess and Twisted Kingdom. I gave both of those 4 stars. Again, part of my dark romance journey. And then I read Bride by Allie Hazelwood. Going back now, I gave it 3 stars. I think I would give it like 2.5. I would knock it down a little bit. I really did not enjoy Bride. It was my first book by Allie Hazelwood this year, and I don't know. I think it's because I'm such a fantasy girly and I'm such a romantic girl at heart. I did not like the way it was written. There wasn't enough slow burn for me in this. It's literally about like a vampire and a werewolf. The world building was like so like non-existent that I just didn't like it. Like, this is like a fantasy book for people who don't often read fantasy, I would say. Like, I just didn't enjoy it because I like very intense world building and like in-depth plot points and things like that. It was kind of predictable for me. So, but that was my first Allie Hazelwood book. Maybe I would read something else by her. Like, she has other romance books I would probably read. Oh my god. Okay, then I went on like the best journey ever. Then I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is the Chestnut Spring series. This is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. I fell in love. I had like a literal like compulsion to read the whole series after I read the first book. So I read all of the Chestnut Spring series, which I think is 5 books. I rated them all 5 stars, you guys. I have never read a series so fast in my life. Honestly, it might be one of my favorite series of the whole entire year. If you guys need a new romance author, please read Elsie Silver. And I'm really upset with myself because I am going to judge a book by its cover, and I'm going to judge it by the trope, which is not good. I need to do less of that in 2025. But as you guys can see, I love to read dark romance books, and I love fantasy, and I love romantasy. So I was really not interested when everyone was telling me to read Elsie Silver. I was like, why would I read a cowboy romance? Like, literally the first book is about a bull rider, and I was like, this is probably my nightmare. Like, This is not anything that I would ever be interested in. Like, I do not care about these people. Like, I love like a moody, like, you know what I mean? No, I promise you, if you're like me and you read like crazy, like dark romance, it doesn't matter. I think you will love Elsie Silver. She does romance the best of any romance author I've ever read. I think she's my favorite because just all of her storylines, all of her characters, I'm so obsessed with, and I'm really happy because I discovered her this year and like 8 of her books were in my top 24 of this year. Like, I honestly wanted to put all of them in there, but I couldn't. Out of the entire Chestnut Spring series, I would say Heartless and Powerless were my 2 favorites. Heartless is a single dad nanny trope, and then the second one is like childhood sweethearts, which I loved. I think if I remember correctly, she's a ballerina, and then the guy that like she's had a crush on pretty much her whole life and they're like childhood sweethearts is a hockey player. I don't know, I just became obsessed with it. Is she a ballerina? That could be so wrong. I might be mixing books up. Then I read The Song of Achilles. Thank God I finally got around to reading this because I gave it 5 stars. I became obsessed with Greek mythology. This was the first Greek mythology book that I read this year, and it's what kickstarted my love for Greek mythology. I'm hoping in 2025 I can read some more books by different authors. This one is by Madeline Miller, but I loved it. It's really beautifully told, and I just like the concept of a retelling. So I want to read historical fiction because that's kind of what this book is. Greek mythology, historical fiction, and I think that in 2025 I will love reading historical fiction. I already bought The Nightingale and I bought The Woman by Kristen Hanna, so I know that I'm gonna like be obsessed with those and probably lose my mind, but I wasn't emotionally ready to read them this year, but I did love The Song of Achilles. Then in preparation for the Persephone Hades series, this is by Scarlett St. Clair, I read all of the books that were out last year that were in Persephone's perspective. If you guys need a romantasy series, lock into this. Please read the Hades Persephone series because it is so good, and I read it during this time because I obviously became obsessed with Greek mythology. This is not a historical fiction. This is just, it's like straight up fantasy, but it's a take on Persephone and Hades' love story. It's so spicy and it's so good. It is amazing, but I read all of Persephone's books last year, never got around to reading Hades' perspectives, so I did that this year. There were 3 books in his perspective that I read. I gave them each like 4 or 5 stars. They were really good, and I'm glad that I read his perspective. In hindsight, I probably would have alternated had I known that he had some, so I would read like Persephone's book and then Hades, Persephone, Hades, Persephone, Hades. If you're gonna start the series, do it that way because I felt like it would have been more impactful had I had his perspective at the time that I was reading hers. Then I read King of Sloth. This one I gave a 3.5. I honestly was like kind of disappointed in this because I've loved the Kings of Sin series like the whole time I've been reading it, and I don't know if it's just kind of like I think it's more so a change in my style of reading. I just think that maybe I like, no, that's not true because Christian Harper is like one of my favorite book boyfriends of all time. He's the Twisted Lies. So I don't know what it is. I just didn't love King of Sloth. Maybe it was just like the concept of it. I just wasn't into it, but I gave this one 3.5. Then I read Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. Lauren Asher is a really great romance author. I love so many of her books. I gave this one 4 stars. It's like about a woman who, it's kind of childhood sweethearts. Like they used to have a thing when she was younger and then they grew apart. They had a falling out. She goes back to her hometown and she does interior design and like decorates homes and he does construction. They have to work together on a project. It's like forced proximity kind of thing, which I really enjoyed. I just think it was a little bit long for me. Could have been a little bit shorter, but I loved it. She is a great romance author and I have a bunch of books on my TBR by her that I really want to read. Oh my god. And then I started, Magnolia Parks. I started the Magnolia Park series. You guys know because I uploaded reading vlogs for them. This was like my favorite journey of the year. Like I am so happy I committed to reading these books because they actually changed my life. They're so good. Out of all of the books in the series, I would say The Great Undoing, which is Daisy's book, was my favorite of the whole series. I loved it so much. I love Magnolia and Daisy's characters separately. They both like speak to me in different ways. Even the last book though in the series took me so long to read. It took me the entire month of June to get through. If you haven't read Magnolia Parks, you need to read it immediately. I can't even describe to you how much I love Jessa Hastings' writings, and I need to read more books by her because she has another series out that is not romance. I think it's actually fantasy, so I'm gonna read more from her in 2025 because I loved Magnolia Park so much, but I don't think I've been this emotionally attached to characters and like miss characters so much than I have in Magnolia Parks. Like, they're so good. And I just love that it's set in London. It's about like a high society, rich, young adult group of people who live in London, but live in London. I don't know why I got my words mixed up, but they live in London, and like there's so much drama. There's love triangles, and honestly, everything that happens in the entirety of Magnolia Parks, you literally cannot even predict. You could not guess what is going to happen in these books. Also, once you read the first Magnolia book, then you switch to reading Daisy's perspective. I think I love Daisy even more than I love Magnolia. You guys will be obsessed with Daisy. She's iconic. So I read all of Magnolia Parks, and then I read the Mindfuck series. This series was also in my top 24. I loved it. I wouldn't say it's a dark romance. I would say it's thriller, but there is a romance aspect to it. It's about a serial killer who starts dating an FBI agent who specifically investigates serial killers. So he's like basically working on the cases that she is literally like killing these people, and he's trying to figure out who is it, but he's dating her and he doesn't know that it's her. It's so interesting, and that makes it so much more stressful because you're reading their perspectives and you're like, oh god, like this is not going to end well. But it also has very, very dark aspects in it. So I would read the trigger warnings for that because it was pretty dark. Like out of all the books that I've read, like I was reading this one and I was like, oh, okay, it's getting there. It was very dark, but I really, really enjoyed it. And then next I read A Touch of Chaos, which is the last book in the Hades and Persephone series. And I felt like it wrapped everything up perfectly. It was the perfect way to end this series, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This was very popular this year. A lot of you guys also read this book. It is I don't know if I would say, I mean, it's a romantasy book, but it's also young adult. So there's not gonna be any spice, just warning you guys, but it's very, very good. It has a lot of aspects from other fantasy books that I've read before. Like, although it was cliche in some ways, I felt like it was a very like well-rounded, easy read for new fantasy readers. Like if someone wanted to start a fantasy series, I would recommend like Fourth Wing and Powerless. Powerless is so easy to read, but not in a bad way, like just in a well-rounded, good read. So I read Powerless, I gave it 4 stars. I read Powerful, which is the novella, and I gave that one 5 stars. I love the novella. And then I read Reckless, which I gave 4.5. The ending of that book was so good. It's making me so excited for her next book. I need to see when it launches because when it comes out in 2025 because I really want to read it. And then I read Play Along by Liz Tomford. Oh my god, you guys, I had been waiting for this book. This was also one of my most anticipated reads of 2024. This is the Windy City series. Every book in the Windy City series is my favorite. Like, I don't think I could pick, actually, no, I could pick because I loved Caught Up, but every book in this series is so good. This is a romance series. It's a spicy romance series. If you haven't started the Windy City series, this is the 4th book in it. Each book is like a different sport, so they're all different athletes, different professional athletes, and then each one is kind of different. Like each girl does something different. One of them is a nanny, one of them is like the coach's daughter, one of them is their flight attendant. Like they're all different, but they're so good, and I was really looking forward to Play Along, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. Then I read Wild Love. This one is by Elsie Silver. This is the Rose Hill series. So after I read all of Chestnut Springs, I started the Rose Hill series. The first book in it is Wild Love. I was obsessed with it. I also just love when authors like interconnect all of their different series. Like all of her books, like Gold Rush Ranch, Chestnut Springs, Rose Hill, they all have like some relative connection to each other, which I always just really like. So of course I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is another Greek mythology book. This one was so cool because I did not know anything about Ariadne. I didn't know anything about her story. Again, it was a historical fiction, so it's a retelling of her story. It was so insane and so good. I was hooked. I could not get enough of this series. Not series, but I couldn't get enough of this book. Read The Song of Achilles and you've read Circe by Madeline Miller. Read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint because it's very, very similar and just as impactful. And she has other Greek mythology books that I need to read, but this one was so good. And then right after that, I read Circe by Madeline Miller. I gave it 5 stars. This was my favorite book of all of 2024. Circe was number 1. I became obsessed with it. I just like fell in love with her. I just love the story. It made me cry so much. I also like immediately after reading that book, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept looking all of this stuff up about Circe, and like I just was so interested in her story. And Madeline Miller just does such a great job of giving you like such a powerful emotional emotional impact when you're reading her books. I fell in love with it. Then I started the Addicted series. So the first book in it is Addicted to You. I gave this one 3.5. This was a series I thought I would like a lot more, and I just ended up like not really falling in love with it. I don't know if I'll pick up the rest of the series because so many of you guys have told me I would love it, but I don't know. It's about a girl who she is a sex addict, and then the guy that she is living with or like has a thing with, they live together, is an alcoholic. I don't know. It was like the weirdest. It was so strange. It was so strange. Now when I look back on it, I don't know if I'll actually pick up the rest of the series, which is a bummer because so many of you guys were like, oh my God, you love the Addicted series. And I quite literally did not. Then in August, All This Twisted Glory came out, which is the third book in the This Woven Kingdom series. I've already ranted about that one, but I read this one so quickly. And I also thought it was the last book in the series. So I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. And as I was like 50% through, I was like, wait, this is not the last book because there's no way they were gonna wrap up all of these different things by the end of it. And it is in fact not the last book in the series, but oh my God, it was so good. I gave it 5 stars. Next I read You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. This is a thriller. Now that I'm going through this list, this is the first thriller I read all year, and I read it in August, which is kind of shocking because I felt like last year or like 2 years ago, I felt like I was really heavy in the thrillers. But anyway, I gave this one 4 stars. It's a good thriller, but I think that the ending is hit or miss. Like I think that some people either really loved it or really didn't like it, but everyone I talked to was like the ending was not it. So I'm like, I don't know if I feel like now I'd probably give it 3.5 stars. I don't think I was obsessed with it, but Geneva Rose is one of my favorite thriller authors, which is why I expected to be obsessed with this. And I was not. Then I read 2 books by Rena Kent. I read Black Knight and Vicious Prince. Both of them I gave 3 stars. Again, kind of just like filler books that I enjoyed but wasn't obsessed with. And then I read The Night Shift, which this was a really one-off random book. I don't think anyone has ever read this book that follows me because I posted being like, can you guys please tell me if you guys liked this book? And then I looked on my Goodreads recap and it was like least shelved book of the year. And it was this one. This is a book that I randomly picked up that I wanted to pick a book that wasn't recommended to me off social media, and it was this one. Honestly, it's a very interesting take on like female friendships. I thought it was really interesting. It wasn't a thriller. I would say it was a psychological thriller almost. It was very interesting. It's about this woman who works the night shift and she kind of becomes obsessed with this other girl that's working there, and she starts to kind of take on her personality. It does become like strange in a way, but it's also like you can see why it's her perspective and you can see why she's choosing to do the things that she's doing. Honestly, I really enjoyed the ending of it. Like I thought the ending was really cool. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I thought it was really interesting. I would love to hear from other people if you guys have read this book because I haven't met anyone who has, so please let me know. Oh my God, and then in September, I read the Plated Prisoners series. This was 6 books. And they took over my life. They've taken over my whole personality. And now I've made every single one of my friends read them because I am obsessed. So the Plated Prisoner series, I would say it's a darker romantasy series. It is so good. You guys will be obsessed with it. So many of you guys have started it because of me and have messaged me and been like, I love this series so much. It's a take on King Midas. So King Midas, everything he touches turns to gold. It's about the woman. It's a female main character. She essentially has been turned completely gold and she lives with King Midas. She's like his like prize possession, whatever. It's all in her perspective and it's about her life. And there are so many twists and turns. Like the difference between book 1 to book 6, I don't even know how to describe. It goes so far. I literally was in a depression when I finished this book because I was so obsessed with this series. I didn't want to say goodbye to these characters. Like this is, I think, one of my favorite fantasy series I've ever read. I hope that you guys like it, and if you do, please message me. It is so good. I will say the first book is a teeny tiny bit slow, and the first chapter of the first book I think is almost like a jump scare. Like I feel like it is very aggressive in the beginning just to like prepare you for what's to come, but the whole book is not like how the first chapter is. So I'm just gonna warn you there. The first chapter of Guild, you're gonna be like, oh my God, what is this book? No, it's very good. Like just keep reading, push through, not even push through. It's really good, okay? Next, I read Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. This is a thriller. I loved the ending. I gave it 5 stars. It's honestly honestly kind of hard for me now to give thrillers 5 stars because I feel like they end up being a little bit predictable, but this one was really good. It's about a woman whose son goes missing, and it's like a year later. She's obviously still not over it, so she hires a private investigator. She starts to find out all of these different things. She's trying to find her son. So interesting. I loved the ending of this. And then next I read Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This one was also really good. I gave this one 5 stars. It's about this couple. They go to buy this new house. It's like out in the middle of nowhere. When they get to the house, they're unable to leave. They get stuck there. I think they get snowed in, if I remember right. And then a bunch of weird stuff starts happening, but the ending was also very good. It got a little weird, but it was good. Next, I read Wild Eyes. This is the second book in the Rose Hill series by Elsie Silver. Once again, I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It was so good. I keep saying it was so good a million times in this, but it's like I run out of descriptive words to say, okay? Then I read Ruthless Empire. This is another Rena Kent book. I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read Bye Baby. This was incredible, you guys. This is a psychological thriller. It's so good, but it's also a really interesting take on like female friendships. I loved it. It's by the same author as Tell Me Lies. If you watch Tell Me Lies this year, you will love this book. It was so good. I was like weirded out but confused, but you also are like, whose side am I on? Who do I like? What's going on here? Like you keep going back and forth. It's just kind of like, it's a psychological thriller and it was incredible. I rated it 5 stars. Then I read Variation by Rebecca Yarros. This one I also gave 5 stars. It's like the perfect, I would say it's a perfect romance series. Like it has all of the elements that you would love in a romance. It's about this girl and it's childhood sweetheart. So she's from this small town and she's a ballerina. Anything ballerina I am obsessed with because I would love to be a ballerina one day. My dream is dying, but I just lived through these books. So she's a ballerina. He like saves people. He's like a Coast Guard or something like that. And they used to like be obsessed with each other when they were little, and then they grew apart, something happened and they separated. You're kind of trying to figure out the whole time like what happened with these two? Why do they not like each other? But they cannot resist each other. They get put in a situation where they have to be around each other, and it's so good. The tension is great, the romance is great, like it's so, makes me so happy. Then I read Haunting Adeline, which was crazy. I honestly just read this because I was like, I have to read this and get it over with. I always wondered what people were talking about when they read this book. It's dark romance. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite dark romance. Like I loved other ones more. I felt like there was just a lot of stuff thrown in there just to be thrown in there. I don't know if it's I don't think it's my cup of tea, but I did read it. And then I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I actually didn't love this. I gave it 3.5. It was very, I don't know how I would describe it. I just felt like some of it was very predictable, but also the ending was kind of like, what? And I hate that feeling when I get to the end of a thriller. Then I read Just Like Home, which was my first horror book of the whole year. I was honestly like really looking forward to this book because I think in 2025 I want to read more horror. Like I enjoyed the concept of this book, but for me, I don't know why, I don't feel like it was like well executed. I couldn't picture a lot of the stuff going on, and I talked to so many of you guys and you guys were like, I read that book and I wasn't obsessed with it. So you guys all recommended me other horror books that I'm gonna try out in 2025 because I think that I would love horror. I really want to read Stephen King in 2025 because I've never read any Stephen King. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars or 3.5 stars. No, I gave it 3 because it was good, but I wasn't obsessed. Then I read 4 Rena Kent books in a row. I read Reign of a King, Rise of a Queen, All the Lies and All the Truths. Both of them are 2 different duologies, so I read both of those. They all were pretty much 3 stars for me. I wasn't like dying obsessed with them, but they were still good. This is when I started to realize, oh my god, I'm not meeting my reading goal. I must read really quick, easy books. And all of these were like 200 something pages, so I read them all in like a day. Then I read Quicksilver, which I was obsessed with. It's fae, it's romantasy. There's only 1 book out right now, but you guys, when the rest of these books come out, I think we're all gonna be obsessed. And I really hope that the rest of the books are just as good as this first one was. If you're looking to start a new romantasy series, this is it. It's just the first book in it, and I feel like it's got everything that you want out of a fantasy. It's the same exact thing, like not the same exact thing as Fourth Wing, but the elements are the same. Like you've got like challenges, you have a really strong, great female main character. It starts with action, like it starts, you're immediately hooked, like you're immediately like, wait, where is this going? I love the world that it's in. It is so well written and it just is so good, and you guys all recommended for me to read Quicksilver and I loved it. You guys will be obsessed, honestly. Anything Fae, I will absolutely eat up. Next, I started the Crowns of Nyaxia series. The first book is The Serpent and Wings of Night, so there's 4 or 5 books in the series. Yes, there's 5 books out in this series, including the novella, and then there's like a standalone. I loved this so much. Again, I can't believe I waited so long to read this series. This was like one of my top books I was supposed to read in 2023 and I didn't. And honestly, I'm glad I waited because there was like another book out by the time I read it, but it was incredible. If you guys are looking to get invested again in another romantasy fantasy series, this is the one to do it. They are so incredible. Even the novella and the standalone were some of my favorite books that I read all year, which says a lot because there's sometimes when I read fantasy series and they try and do a novella like here and there, I'm like, this is irrelevant. I don't care. I just want to get back to the main characters. No, I was like just as obsessed with them. And if you haven't read them, if you read The Serpent and Wings of Night and you skipped over the novella and the standalone, go back and read them because I was absolutely hooked to them. I could not get enough. This series is about vampires, like the world that they live in. There's all these different vampires, but the female main character is a human, but she was raised by vampires. So it's very interesting how she kind of like navigates things. They also have, the first book is essentially like, it's kind of Hunger Games-esque. There's like a big challenge in it where they fight to the death. It's very interesting. She's obviously the underdog. She's the human and she's up against all of these different vampires and things like that. It gets so good. Also, no one does a slow burn like Carissa Broadbent. Like after reading all of these books in the series, I was like, I don't think I've read a slow burn like this since ACOTAR. Like a lot of times when you read fantasy now, I feel like people like know the method and the equation to a good fantasy book. Like with Fourth Wing or with Quicksilver, it's like, I'm gonna do this, and then in the first book, they're gonna like be in love and that's gonna be what it is. No, she does slow burn like no other. I love that. Like I love when it's not like an instant love and like an instant match. I just love like the building of a relationship. I love the arc of that and she does it so good. So if that's something that you love, you will love the Crowns of Nyaxia series. And then the last 2 books that I read for 2024, we're finally here. I started the Gold Rush Ranch series by Elsie Silver. So I read Off to the Races, which is the first book, and then I also read A Photo Finish, which is the second book. I gave the first book 5 stars. It was so good. It also was really interesting because I read Chestnut Springs first and then I read Gold Rush Ranch. I think you're supposed to read Gold Rush Ranch first. It doesn't matter, obviously, because I read them both out of order, but I would start with Gold Rush Ranch first and then move to Chestnut Springs because it starts with a character that I love so much. Like Billy, I think is probably one of my favorite characters that Elsie Silver has ever written. I'm obsessed with her, but then it also has the sister of all of the brothers that are in Chestnut Ranch. So it like has a really good crossover in there, which I am obsessed with. So I started those. I gave the first one 5 stars and then I gave A Photo Finish 4.5. I'm really happy I ended my year with Elsie Silver because I think that she could have been my favorite author of the whole year. I became obsessed with her. Those were all of the books that I read for 2024. I am so happy with all of my reads this year. I'm gonna start setting new reading goals for 2025. I'm gonna probably post a video where I do like what's on my TBR for 2025 and like what kind of talk through what my reading goals would be because I have a couple things that I really do want to change and adjust and branch out to in 2025. So I'm really excited about that because reading is so fun, but it's also important to kind of like switch up things that you read and like, I don't know, branch out in different genres. Also, I wanted to update you guys. I will be coming out with my book merch again in early 2025. A lot of you guys have been asking me about it on TikTok and on Instagram because you guys have seen the Kindle cases that I've posted. I do have Kindle cases coming out and they are very perfect and very cute. I've had the samples for a couple months, but there are some tweaks that I need to make adjustments on. I really want them to be great for you guys. So I am still working on them, but they should be done. I'm really hoping to launch by February of 2025. That is my goal. Fingers crossed, if all of the production goes right and everything is in time, I will have my Kindle cases by February of 2025. They're gonna launch on my website, and I'm also gonna be having a ton of book merch that's gonna be coming out in 2025 that I've been working on. So I'm really excited about that, and I just wanna say thank you guys for supporting me on my reading journey. I know that I've been posting so much more reading content over the past couple years, and this year I actually launched my other book TikTok and book Instagram, so it's made me really happy that you guys have supported me, and I feel like I've built such a great community. I love talking about books with you guys. Let me know what your top books of 2024 are, because if I haven't read them, I need to add them onto my TBR. And if you read any of these, let me know what you guys thought about them, because like I said, I just like to hear what you guys think. That's why I add you guys on Fable and Goodreads, because I just love your commentary when I'm reading books and all of the different updates and stuff like that. So anyway, that is it for this extremely long video. I hope that you guys liked it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.